Hello everyone, welcome back to The Budget Sportsman. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. Today I'm going to share with you how to build an aider out of AmSteel. We're going to start by building a single step aider, and once you get the basics of working with the AmSteel down, then I'll show you how to make a double step aider. And once you know how to do a single and a double, if you wanted to do a triple or a four step, whatever it is, you could do that once you understand those basics. I'm going to show you how to do it today using no fancy tools, stuff you probably have lying around the house. And I'm going to try to make it so that you can see I've got an overhead camera here so that you can see exactly what's going on. I do want to give credit to where credit is due because I learned how to build these aiders from a video on Jerry Gross's YouTube channel. And if you don't know who he is the owner of Custom Gear Modifications. But I want to give credit because that's where I learned how to do this. And so you might want to go watch his video as well. He's got some great information. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to do it with his overhead camera so that hopefully there would be a few parts that maybe you could see a little bit more clearly. Before we dive into building these aiders today, I want to talk about why I'm building them instead of buying them. And the simple answer is I'm trying to save some money. Ultimately, what I'm looking for my hunting setup this year is I want a double step aider on each of my sticks, and I've got a 3-pack of sticks. Now, when you go to buy these aiders from Double Step Outdoors or other places, but on Double Step is the place I check the pricing, a single step aider is $15. A double step aider is $28, and a triple step aider is $40. Now, I wanted 3 double step aiders at $28 a piece. That'd be $84 plus shipping. Now, the aiders are made out of 1/8" AmSteel, and on Double Step Outdoors, you can get this 1/8" AmSteel for about 35 cents a foot. A double step aider only takes about 10 feet of AmSteel, so that's say $3, $3.50, and then you're going to need some sort of tubing to make the step, which might be another $2 for the 2 steps, maybe, depending on where you get it. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. So for about $5, I can build a double step aider rather than spending $28 on one that's already been made for me. So let's go ahead and talk about the tools that you're going to need to get ready to build these aiders. The first thing that you're going to want is you're definitely going to want a tape measure to measure out your lengths. And I'm not really going to do that on camera today, but I will tell you the lengths that you need to measure out. You're going to need a knife, and you're going to want something really, really sharp to cut this AmSteel. It is very tough to cut. In fact, I built an aider last night. I put a fresh blade in this utility knife, and by the time I got done with one aider, I could already tell it was a lot more dull than it was when I started. And so you're probably going to want to have some extra blades on hand as well. Then you're going to want, at least I prefer, some sort of a block of wood, something you don't care about, or some sort of a cutting mat, a cutting board, something that you can cut into where you're not going to cut into the surface of your table, because sometimes it takes some real pressure to cut through the AmSteel, and I don't want you cutting into your nice work surface or your wife's kitchen table. Then you're going to need some wire. This is sort of like gardening wire, crafting wire, and this is going to be really, really important. You want something that's a little bit stiff, that's got some strength to it, but also not too terribly thick. As I mentioned before, you're going to want some sort of tubing most likely to make the step. It just helps give some shape to your step. What I'm using today is this just vinyl tubing. It's 3/8 inside diameter and 1/2 inch outside diameter. I have in the past also used 3/8 fuel line. It's a little bit thicker walled and it's a little bit heavier, but I will say it's a little bit more rigid, and I don't know which I prefer. It's a little heavier. I'm trying to save some weight by going with the vinyl tubing. Whichever you prefer is fine. I think the vinyl tubing is going to work just fine, and of course price may play a factor there as well, but you're going to need some of that. I'm using about 7 inches per step. You might want to go a little bit wider depending on your preference, but calculate that out. You'll need about 7 inches per step. Then you're going to need some extra tools here that I'm guessing you have lying around your house. If you watch a lot of videos about working with AmSteel, they're going to say you need a FID. With what we're doing today, I don't think you do, but what is really helpful is this mechanical pencil is really great. You'll see how I use it later for pushing through the AmSteel. It's got a very thin point and then it tapers out, and this works really well. Then I also have this pen. It's a pretty typical Bic pen here, and it's got the taper on there, and it will really help you to open up some holes in the AmSteel as well. And then you're probably going to want a marker to mark out your AmSteel. All right, so let's dive into building our single step aider. Now, to make a single step aider, I'm going to start with 67 inches here of 1/8 inch AmSteel. I'm aiming for about a 19 to 20 inch step spacing, so if you are wanting a shorter step or a longer step, then you can adjust your length accordingly. Now, in order to attach this to my stick, I'm going to be making a loop on either end here. And what I want is I want about a 4 to 5 inch loop. That means the total length of the loop, or it's going to stand about 2 to 2.5 inches tall. And then I'm also going to do a berry. And my berry is going to be about 5 to 6 inches long. I've seen people recommend 8 to 10 inches long. But I have some aiders that were built by Treetop Hunting, and their berry is only about 5 inches long, and I find it a little bit easier to work with that shorter berry. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my tape measure here. And remember, I said that I was wanting to have about a 5-inch loop and about a 5-inch berry. So that means I'm going to measure out about 10 inches here. There's 10 inches, and if you want to, you can go ahead and mark that with a Sharpie if you want. But really at this point, there's no necessarily reason to do that. What I'm going to do is just mark that spot, and I'm going to fluff it. I'm just going to squeeze it together and kind of open that up. Now I'm going to take this mechanical pencil, and I'm going to go through, and I'm going to try to weave through the braids. I'm not trying to split any braids or catch any little strands. I want to make sure I'm between the braids of this. And see, now I've poked that through, and I've got it opened up. And what I do sometimes now is pull that out, take my pen, insert it, and it's a little bit easier to open that up a little bit more widely there. So now I'm going to take this other end, I'm going to take the tag end, and I'm going to feed it back through. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to do a Brummel splice. So you feed that through and pull that down, and now I can sort of measure that knot. How am I doing? Well, I'm a little bit short there. Hopefully you can see that. I'm a little bit short on my loop here. I want this to be 2.5 inches, so I'm going to pull that back a little bit. And I'm right there. I'm a little bit over 2. That should be pretty good. And what I want to do is I want to check over here. I've got about 5.5 inches left that I can bury, so that's fine. So now what you're going to want to do is, now that you have that spot marked, just kind of mark it, pull it back, and then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to fluff this up. Notice before we took our tag end through the main line, and now we're going to go the opposite way. We're going to take our main line back through our tag end. So we're doing the same thing. We're just going to open this up, and we're going to just stick that mechanical pencil down through there, trying to get in the middle, trying not to catch any strands, but just to split those braids. Stick my pencil in like this, and now I'm going to grab the whole other end, and I'm going to feed it back through. And now what you can see is that's what's called a Brummel splice. And one line is going through this, and then we're going back through the other way. And when you pull that down, now you've got a really nice, secure connection. Now the next thing to do, as I already mentioned, is we're going to do a berry. And as I mentioned, we've got about 5 inches left there for our berry. And what you're going to do is you're going to use this wire right here. I've got it doubled up with a loop at the end. And I'm going to come down, and I want to make sure I come down plenty more than 5 inches, because it's going to sort of expand on itself, or I should say shrink on itself. So I'm going to probably come down here about 7 or 8 inches, and I'm just going to start fluffing this up the whole way along, and it's going to open up a path or a hallway almost down through there. So I'm going to come down here to the end, and I'm going to take this wire, and I'm not going to try to split any strands off of there. I want to make sure I'm going between, I'm struggling there a little bit, going between the braids. There we go. Now I've kind of got that open up, like I said, there's a hallway, and I'm just going to feed this all the way up through there. And then I'm going to try to come out. I'm going to see where my tag end is, and I want to come out sort of right where the tag end is. And again, I'm just going to try to poke it through in such a way that I'm not splitting off little strands. All right, there it is. It's coming down through just like that. Now I'm going to open this up. I'm going to try to just wiggle that wire, and I'm going to open up the strand right where I came out. Can even take my pencil, open that up a little bit. Just try to open it up, get a nice big hole. Now before I try to put this berry in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I'm just going to trim the end of my tag just a little bit so I can feather it off. So I'm just going to cut a little bit like that. All right, that's a fresh blade. That cut pretty good. I'm just going to try to do that so it tapers down just a little bit. Now I'm going to split. You can see I have this wire here. I'm going to split it open just a little bit. And I'm going to feed the end of this AmSteel up in there, and I'm going to squeeze it down as tight as I can. Even if you had a little pliers here to really squeeze that and pinch it, that might help as well. And again, now I'm going to try to really open up this hole, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to start pulling this down. Now usually what happens here is the hardest part of this is getting it started. And if you can just sort of work it and get it, there we go. Once you get it down inside of there, you can usually feed it up on there pretty nicely. And what I try to do is I try to feed it up all the way. And the trick here is not letting it come off of your wire, or you'll have to start over, but I try to feed it all the way and come out down below where my wire went in. Because now that I can get my fingers on it, I can really work this up, and I can really make sure. I'm having a little hard time there with this one. There we go. Now that is all nice and tight. Everything's pulled down, but I don't like that tag in there, obviously, but I'm going to just milk this back down, just squeeze it out. And there is my first loop with a 5-inch bury, and that's what's going to connect to my stick. Now the next thing that you're going to do is just repeat that same exact process on the opposite side. And there you have 2 loops on either end of your single step aider. And really the only thing left to do at this point to make a single step is just to put your tubing on. And if you get 3/8 inch inside diameter tubing, you should be able to fit this in there without much problem. And right there you have it. You have a single step aider all ready to go. I was going for about a 19 to 20 inch step spacing. I actually think I got a little bit more there. I'm about, if I really step into it, it's going to sag down, but just like that, I'm about a 19.5, 20 inch step spacing. I'm really close there, so you can adjust your measurements as necessary. So now that you see how easy it is to build the single step aider, let's go ahead and build the double step aider. And it's really not much more difficult. There's just a couple extra steps to the process to add in the extra step. The first thing that you're going to want to do is, instead of starting with a 67-inch piece, you're going to want to start with a 107-inch piece. You're going to notice that 67 plus 40 is 107, so we've added an extra 40 inches or 20 inches on each side to give us space for that extra step. But really, the first part of making this aider is exactly like making the single step. You want to go through the same process and put a loop on both ends of your double step aider. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. All right, now that you have a loop on both ends of this, it really is looking just like your single step, just quite a bit longer. The next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and put on one of your steps. Again, I've got 2 here, and I'm going about 7 inches wide on each of my steps. If you want to go wider, you just need to account for that in the length of your AmSteel when you're getting started. But the first thing you want to do is you want to put on the tubing for your bottom step, because after you add the second step, you're not going to be able to do that. Now, for some reason, my first one on that single step aider, it slid right through, but I'm having a little bit more trouble getting it through on this one. So what I can do is I can use some of that same wire I've been using to do my bury. I'm just going to pass that through. I have a little hook. Just going to hook that onto the loop. Feed it back in there and pull it right through really easily. So now that you've got your step on there, what you can do is go ahead and get out your tape measure. And again, if you're going to make a different step spacing or different width of step, you may have to adjust some of these measurements. But what I've discovered that works well for me to get about an even step spacing is if I come down here and I go from about, if I go from about where the Brummel lock is on my loop, not from the top of the loop, but from about the bottom of the loop where that Brummel is, and I come down 19 inches. One of the things you have to remember is when you do these buries, your main line is actually going to shrink a little bit. So I'm adding 19 inches here, but you also have to remember that from my step, I'm going to the top of my stick, which gives me a little bit of extra space. And so I found that if I start at 19 inches here, that does really well for me. So I'm going to go ahead and fluff that right there at 19 inches. I'm going to stick this mechanical pencil through, and then I'm going to stick the pen through. Now the next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need a piece of AmSteel here that's about 18 inches long. We're going to do 2 5-inch buries, one on either side of the step, and a 7-inch step spacing. So that gives us 7 plus 5 and 5 is 12, and then 17. But what I've noticed is that by the time I do the Brummel lock, I end up with kind of a short bury if I don't leave myself a little bit of extra. So I've gone about 18 or 18.5 inches here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take that 18-inch piece and feed it through this opening that I just made. And then I'm going to just go ahead and measure out here about 5 inches. Give myself maybe just a little bit more than 5 inches there for my bury. And I'm going to open this up. And again, you can see we passed this line through this line, but now we need to go back and do it the opposite direction. And so we're going to go ahead and have to pass this through. And this is a case where you might need to use the wire again. Sometimes it can be a little tricky to get that through. Okay, no problem. But if you can't get it through, you can just stick that wire through, hook it on, and pull that loop through. So there we go. We got another Brummel splice, a Brummel lock there, and that's going to form this first part of our second step. Now, we're going to take this tag end, and you want to make sure it's the short end right now. And we're going to take that, we're going to do the same thing, we're just going to feather that a little bit. Just a little bit. You can see my knife's already getting dull, even though I had just replaced this blade right before we started the video. All right, and now you're going to want to take this bury up towards your main loop. So up toward the top, you want to bury this way, not down toward your step. So get my wire out again. And I'm just going to flip this around because I'm right-handed and it just works a little bit better for me to feed the wire in that way. So now my loop is over here. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to take this bury back up. And again, I've got 5 inches there. It's what I wanted. But I'm going to go up about 7 or 8 inches here and start feeding that wire through. Going to fluff it. And then again, I'm going to try to come out on the side where my standing line or my tag end of that other step is. There we go. Got it fed through. Now I just need to really open this up. I'm going to wiggle that around to try to separate those braids there. Take my mechanical pencil, try to shove it down in there. Again, not trying to split off individual strands, but get between the braids. Open up this wire, stick this in, and as you've already seen, we've done this a couple of times before, so you should know what we're doing. Just repeating the process. It's pretty much the same thing. And then I'm going to just feed this down. Again, just getting it started is the hardest part. You can get it to get down in there. There we go, starting to move. There we go. Feed it up. And if I can, I'm going to pop it out the bottom side here. I really need to because I don't have, see how there's still a loop up here? It's not pulled tight. So I really need to get this out. There we go. Where I can pull on it. And once I can pull on it, then I can pull that loop out. You can see how that's nice and neat now. Got this tag in, and I'll just milk this back the other way. Just squeeze it out. And there we go. Now the next thing you're going to do, again, I'm going to turn this. We've got our 2 loops to my right, this direction over here. The next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and put your extra step on, your second step here. And let's see how this lays best. I think it's going to lay like that the best. I'm going to stick that step on. And then again, I'm going to do the same thing I did before, which is measure 19 inches. 19 inches, we're going to start here at the lock of our loop there. Put 19 inches, come down 19 inches right about there. And that's where we're going to attach the opposite side of our stick. Now we're done with the tape measure. I'll get that out of the way. Open that up. And I'm going to just do the same thing. Feed that mechanical pencil through. You've seen me do it a bunch of times. All right, got that hole opened up, and I'm just going to take this step and feed it right through that hole. Now, it's really as simple as just opening up. Again, we're trying to do the same thing here. So just open this up over here. And we need to take our main line back through this step to create our Brummel. Stick that mechanical pencil down through there. Hopefully you can see that hole opening up. I'm going to stick the pen down through. And one thing I should mention is you want to try to be in the center as much as you can there. I'm going to really force that pen through all the way to the main body of the pen. That way it's a nice wide hole to feed this through. There we go. Nice and easy. And there is our last Brummel lock there. If you pull down on the step, you're going to see that get nice and tight. The only thing left to do is just bury that last tag in. All right, so there it is, our double step, and I'm just going to check this out. I've got about 19 inches there, a little bit less than 19 inches step to step. And then if I go down this way, I've got about 19 inches, again, not to the end, but to the Brummel lock. And so I've got a really nice double step, 19-inch step-to-step aider. Now, if you want to do longer step spacing or wider step spacing, then you can adjust the measurements on your own. I also want to mention that if you want to do a 3-step aider, you would do the same process. You would just, again, start with about a 40-inch, maybe a little bit more than 40-inch to give yourself room for the shrinkage when you do the buries, but add an extra 40 inches to the 107 that we started with. It'd be 147, and then you would just repeat this process for the middle step twice to get your 3-step aider. If you've enjoyed this video or it's been helpful to you, I would appreciate it if you leave me a comment down below or give me a thumbs up. If you've got a better method to make AmSteel aiders, let me know that as well down in the comments. Until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.